Hello, this is Lawrence Houlgate. I am the author of the 8-book series of study guides on the classical philosophers. These are low-cost guides to help beginning philosophy students understand the classic books of philosophy. The title of each book begins with the word understanding. For example, Understanding Plato, Understanding John Locke, the book we're going to talk about today, Understanding René Descartes, and so on. All books are available at low cost at Amazon.com. Just plug in my name, spell the last name correctly, please, Houlgate, Houlgate, and then write in the words Understanding John Locke or Understanding Plato or whatever book you'd like to look at, and you'll find a detailed page on Amazon.com. At the end of 2021, I finished a long series of episodes on Plato's Socratic Dialogues and his Republic. For those who have not yet heard the series, you can search for it under the title Understanding Plato. And today I'm going to start a new podcast featuring John Locke's Second Treatise of Government. This podcast is based on my book, Understanding John Locke, part of the series that I've already mentioned. John Locke is considered one of the great political philosophers, standing with Plato, Rousseau, and Thomas Hobbes. His Second Treatise of Government had an enormous influence on Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, John Adams, and other Americans who formed the Continental Congress and urged that the British colonists break away from Great Britain and become an independent country. As I read from my book, please listen for the ideas and theories of John Locke that you think influenced the authors of the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitutions. But first, I want to tell you about the fascinating life of John Locke. We're going to devote this episode to a short biography, and if you've got the book and you're reading from it, that is, if you've got my book, Understanding John Locke, I'm reading from Chapter 1, the introduction that is about John Locke. John Locke was born in 1632 in a small thatched cottage in a village in Somerset, England. Locke's father, also called John, was a country lawyer and a clerk to the Justices of the Peace. He had previously served as a captain of cavalry for the parliamentarian forces during the early part of the English Civil War. John's mother was Agnes Keene, spelled K-E-E-N-E. Both of his parents were Puritans, committed to the religious reform movement in the late 16th and 17th centuries that sought to purify, hence the word Puritan, purify the Church of England of all remnants of the Roman Catholic popery, they called it. At the age of 15, young John was admitted to the prestigious Westminster School in London, upon the recommendation and sponsorship of a member of Parliament, who had also been the elder John's commander in the Civil War. 7 years later, the young Locke graduated and was admitted to Christ Church, Oxford, the pinnacle of higher education in 17th century England. And while at Oxford, Locke's main interests were in philosophy and the science of medicine. Upon obtaining bachelor's and master's degrees in 1656 and 1657, he was appointed a fellow at Oxford. He taught philosophy and continued to do research in medicine, although he did not pursue a teaching career. Instead, at the age of 34, while still at Oxford, he met Lord Anthony Ashley Cooper, the first Earl of Shaftsbury, who was so impressed with Locke's medical knowledge that he appointed him as his personal physician. Locke moved into Shaftesbury's home at Exeter House in London, and shortly thereafter Shaftesbury developed a life-threatening infection of his liver. Locke called together several physicians, coordinated their advice, and with the patient's consent, performed surgery to remove the cyst that was the cause of the infection. Shaftesbury survived, expressing his gratitude to Locke for saving his life. Locke's life became much more unpredictable and tumultuous after Shaftesbury's recovery. You see, Shaftesbury was a founder of the Whig movement, W-H-I-G, Whig, the Whig movement, which supported the idea of constitutional limits placed on the power of monarchs. And this put him in direct opposition to the British monarchy and its aristocratic supporters. It also stimulated Locke to begin thinking again about philosophy, specifically moral philosophy. And as an Oxford undergraduate, he's sure to have read not only Plato's and Aristotle's work in the subject, but also the works of modern thinkers like Thomas Hobbes and Baruch Spinoza. Under Shaftesbury's influence, Locke became deeply involved in the Whig movement. This had its dangers, one of which was a growing rumor that Locke had a part in the Rye House plot of 1683, a plan to assassinate King James II and his brother, the Duke of York. Although there was little evidence to support the rumor, as soon as Locke was told about it, he fled England for safe haven in the Netherlands. Locke remained in the Netherlands for 5 years until England's glorious revolution of 1688. It's also known as the Whig Revolution and the Orange Revolution, when the unpopular Catholic King James II was bloodlessly encouraged to abandon the throne for the ascendancy of his Protestant daughter Mary II and her husband William III, the Prince of Orange. At the same time, Locke decided it was now safe for him to return to England, and this time he will return not in panic, but as a Whig celebrity, serving as escort to Mary, the new Queen of England. They arrived in London in February 1689 to great acclamation and celebration. During the years back in England, Locke served as a commissioner on the Board of Trade as its principal consultant, advising on British economic policies. But Locke's best and most influential writing was also done during the long period after his return. He wrote and published the essay concerning human understanding, 2 treatises of government, and Letter of Toleration, all of them now hailed as some of the greatest works in political philosophy. And yet 2 treatises of government was largely unknown during Locke's lifetime. The book was published anonymously, and Locke's identity as author was known only to some students and fellows at Oxford and a few of his Whig friends. Locke was more famous for serving as the Queen's escort than for his philosophical writings on the origin of political power. Everybody knew about his work as the Queen's escort. Very few knew that he was a great philosopher at the same time. John Locke died in 1704, having lived through the English Civil War, the trial and execution of Charles I, the restoration of the monarchy, the Great Fire of London, Locke's own exile in the Netherlands, the exile of James II, and of course, the Glorious Revolution. But Locke did not die died not knowing whether his ideas about natural rights, the importance of consent for legitimate government, his argument for the separation of legislative and executive powers. He did not know, at the time of his death, whether he had or he would have any effect on future relationships between rulers and those over whom they rule. 70 years after his death, Locke's ideas would have their day in the sunshine of intellectual fame, and this would occur not in England, but in the upstart colonies of America. For it was in 1773, when the first printing of Second Treatise in the colonies took place, that Locke's ideas were, quote, neatly and quite properly turned against the British state by the American colonists. Jefferson, Mason, Adams, Hamilton, Jay, and other authors, signers and framers of the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and the Federalist Papers, they all used Locke's work as an invaluable ideological support for the liberal constitutional state and the market society on which the liberal state has been built. And Locke, I'm sure, would be pleased by the real world consequences of his moral and political ideas. And it's not often that a philosophical theory creates such enormous change in political relationships. But Locke would be just as pleased to see that the support for his ideas is constantly challenged and defended. And even though he remained a devout Puritan for his entire life, he was, after all, a philosopher. He would be the first to agree with the observation that the great virtue of philosophy is that it teaches us not what to think, but how to think. And with those words, I'm going to close the biography. This is going to be a short episode, and please come back for the second episode where we're going to talk about what happened to the first treatise. This is called, our episode is called the Second Treatise of Government. What happened to the first? We'll talk about that. I'll talk about that. And then we'll dig into the first part of the Second Treatise of Government. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you. I hope to do this on Mondays. That is published on Mondays. Just keep checking, and you'll see when the other episodes will occur. Thank you very much.